So Michael, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and get started with your presentation. Remember, just for the audience, our user in this case is Chase, and our hacker's persona, which you guys saw, they're trying to, attack us along the way. So just keep that in mind, and we'll talk through that at each stage.
Thanks, Johnny. Like Johnny said, my name is Michael Smith. I'm with Okta. I am a pre-sales engineer here at Okta. And today I wanted to talk to you about Chase. Like we saw earlier with Chase has really changed the way our workforce is accessing our data, is accessing our applications. And we have really adopted cloud and SaaS applications. We've really adopted the mobile device or multiple devices, or even bring your own devices, non-managed devices. But we still have to support a lot of those legacy applications. And all of this while that brick and mortar traditional firewall is not able to expand out to a lot of these attack vectors. And of course, with all these attack vectors that Chase has opened up for us, we really need to find a way to protect Chase's identity and then provide him access to the applications that he needs access to today. So with Okta, our product, we call it our Okta Identity Cloud, is what our whole platform is built on. But our products are based on services that are built in the cloud on an AWS platform. We do not use all of AWS's services, so we do use a lot of our own services for things like load balancer, DNS, things like that. So our uptime and our always-on attitude has been able to help our customers have 99.9999 uptime, 6 nines last year in 2019, which is a little bit more than AWS is actually able to provide their own customers. So with those services, build our products out. And down along the bottom, you'll see a lot of our services, our products under services there, our single sign-on, the ability to log into a dashboard and then have access to all your applications without having to go in and actually log in again to those applications. Or maybe we do require authentication to those applications to do a step-up authentication because that application needs to be more protected, like an HR system, like we were seeing earlier in the example that the hacker attacked, or into maybe a finance solution. And then with that access, we protect and keep all that user data in what we call our universal directory. That's a directory that we use that is a directory for all of the metadata that we use for identities, to be able to provision just what you need to those downstream applications, including directories like LDAP and Active Directory. Starting to move away from keeping all the data inside of Active Directory, a lot like what we were seeing in the hack. DCs have access to everything. And once you have access to those, you have access to the directory. And once you have access to the directory, you have access to all the information in the directory. If we keep that directory information out of Active Directory, which may be HR information or personal information, and keep it in another system that's more secure and away from that domain, that gives us the ability to really protect the identity of that individual and only expose the information for that one system that needs to be there. And our adaptive multi-factor, like Johnny was alluding to, our multi-factor authentication. With Okta, our adaptive multi-factor would really help Chase out, because what we're doing is we're looking at the context of the authentication. We look at things like the IP address. We look at things like the last 10 times the user's logged in on, or 50 times the user's logged in, and from which device. And is this that same device, or is this a new device? We also look at, is it coming through a proxy or from a threat IP range that we already know, that we've discovered through some of Okta's own discoveries. We pass out through our insights of Threat Insight to tell you, hey, these are known hackers. You can block these IP ranges. And then once we find the context of the user, we look at the context of the device. Is this a managed device? Is this device trusted in our domain? Does it meet our compliances within our ecosystem? And then from those decisions and those inspections of the validation of those device and user behavior, we look at what the user experience should look like for that user. And then we move on to authenticating the user. And with Okta, we also do something that's really not known for in Okta today. Most people know us for our MFA and our single sign-on, but we also do a lot of lifecycle management, that joiner, mover, leaver. So whether it be an HR mastered type solution where As soon as they're entered into HR, they're then provisioned to Okta, and that then provisions to all the downstream applications, the right access to the right role for that employee who just joined, giving them that day one access, and even doing staging, because a lot of times those provisioning accesses don't happen immediately. So you can stage the provisioning ahead of time before the employee actually starts. And then when they do start, the day one, their access is turned on and enabled all the way downstream. And then preventing the rights sprawl to where Chase may have too many rights if he's stuck around the company for 5 or 10 years. So we want to go ahead and, as his role changed using our lifecycle management, change his access control to those applications and really remove any unnecessary access from his role. And as he leaves the company, make sure that we take away all the rights and access that he had to any applications inside the infrastructure.
Hey, Michael.
Sure.
John, quick question. You're talking about some of those adaptive multi-factor authentication items. In our scenario here, let's assume that Chase was at a known location. He's coming from a known device. Let's talk a little bit more about where that protection comes in, because seemingly everything looks, pretty good, normal day for Chase. I think in this particular scenario, he's prompted by an email, again, same device, same location. But that point of failure for him is that when he clicks on that link and then enters his credentials. So where's the Okta MFA protection come in at that point? If you don't mind, talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So what we've done is we've integrated with several of our partners, including Proofpoint and Beyond Trust and some of the other presenters today, and Securians. And what we're doing is we're actually we're integrated to where those applications can see a lot of those vectors of attack and very attacked person. And then they are
interesting. A little bit of reverb there, but I think we got it cleared.
and then they are upgrading or increasing the requirements of factors for that user and actually clearing their session so they're having to log in again. But also what we have in place is what we call advanced server access, which is one of our products, as well as integrating with other PAM solutions like Beyond Trust. But we have the ability to use ephemeral certificates for authentication for RDP sessions. Or SSS sessions. So as that hacker would have moved on, we could have prevented those. But with Okta's multi-factor, I have a slide. Let me get past this point, Johnny, and I've got a slide that gives me a really good example of how those factors come into play.
Okay, perfect. Let's go for it.
So on this slide, just want to finish up with workforce identity. That's what we were talking about. Customer identity is something that's really taken off for the last couple of years. Okta helps you integrate and protect your customers as well, your workforce. And our Okta integration network, a lot of what I was talking about there, getting into protecting or integrating with all of the security solutions out there, as well as the applications, so you can deploy your applications within minutes. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And of course, our infrastructure is certified and compliance are regulated. We do a lot of audits from third-party audits to get our compliances up and running. If you have any questions on those, please feel free to ask. But trust.okta.com is a website you can use to show all of our compliances. So at Okta, we address that workforce, but also maybe those external contractors you may be dealing with. Chase may also be working with other organizations that aren't necessarily employees of his company, but they are needing access to internal applications as part of the workforce to do the day-to-day operations of the business. And of course, we talked about the customers. And those are protecting the applications that are in the cloud and also protecting applications that are on-premise. Okta also offers the same single sign-on experience for a lot of your modern authentication applications you may be running on-premise today, and through some of our partners, applications that may not have modern authentication as well. And like I mentioned earlier, that infrastructure, protecting your infrastructure, protecting those servers, whether it's in the cloud, on-premise, or even across multiple cloud solutions. It doesn't have to be just with AWS or just with Azure or just with Google Cloud. It could be a combination of all of them, or even co-locations or things like that. And we're also protecting APIs on the back end. So Okta's putting a lot of infrastructure protection in for those machine-to-machine or non-person interactions that happen. And so talking about what you were asking, Johnny, how do we get in there? What do we do with our we saw through the hack how we're being attacked today with these phishing attacks, these social engineers, all these attacks that are coming at us through whether it be email or whether it be software or malware or things of that nature. And really what multi-factor is the ability to add different types of authentication enhancements. So no longer is it just a username and password, which is stored in that hash. Now we're adding a factor. And these factors can be as simple as, security questions and passwords, which we all know today, but they're moving forward to things like SMS or email, or even that OTP, that one-time password gets sent to you through some kind of application or hardware tool. And then moving all the way up to biometrics, where you have, facial recognition, or you have Windows Hello or Apple Touch ID, or even UTF tokens. So having that comprehensive set of factors gives you the ability to look at the context of the authentication, Johnny, and then take that context into consideration. Now, not only is the context of the behavior, your hacker came in through the machine and everything was trusted, but what we could do also there is look at anomalies of detection, because we report to the user, hey, this user was authenticated, as well as we look at, whether it's going through a proxy or whether it's a device that's out of that context or out of the user's normal control. So with that particular instance, I think we would have helped with the RDP session and through our partnerships, through all of our other security integrations that you're going to hear from today, the ability for them to see that and then upgrade, kill the session, and ask for another factor or increase the factor. And the fact that our factors are in browser factors, so you can't just grab the factor through that hash to be able to authenticate with.
I gotcha. No, that makes total sense. And I think between this slide and the last slide, we had a question that came in from the audience. I think this is a good time to ask it instead of waiting to the end. So the question is, how does Okta provide advanced server security access? So I think that you touched on a little bit of that with some of the factors, but also know that, Okta has a specific product that's built around this. So if you want to take a stab at that question.
Sure, and I want to premise this with it's not a PAM solution. This is a single sign-on or an access management solution for your infrastructure. So what we're doing is when an RDP session or an SS session is requested by a client to a server, we actually are making sure that they have an active Okta session. If they do not, we then prompt them for an Okta login, which will then add the multi-factor authentication there. And then once they have a valid Okta session, we're passing an ephemeral certificate. That ephemeral certificate is minted for every authentication and is only valid for about a minute. So that's going to get you into the server, access to the server. We use local credentials, local accounts. With SSH, you can do SU levels of different SU commands. So whether you're wanting to limit the SU level or limit the actual command they want to use, we can do that as well. And then once they're logged into the server with that ephemeral certificate is no longer valid. So even if a hacker was able to steal that certificate in flight, he couldn't authenticate to a server without that certificate or without an Okta session that's valid from that user.
Got it. Perfect. Yeah. I think that answers the question. If not, we can just ask the audience member to kind of poke in there a little bit more. But I think that's a good explanation of how the Okta platform extends well beyond, or at least leverages the single sign-on multi-factor capabilities within other parts of the platform itself. So,
absolutely. So, a lot of your multi-factor we were talking about needs to not be static. A lot of our solutions that are our competitors are solutions that simply every time you log in, you're prompted with the multi-factor. With Okta, again, we're looking at that behavior, we're looking at the context, and we're taking that a step further so that we can make a determination as to what the user's login experience needs to look at, and then which factors we need to apply. And this is one of my favorite slides, so I threw it in there since it does have to do with adaptive multi-factor. But we take that user behavior, we take that user trust like we talked about, and then we prompt them for something they know, that lower end of the multi-factor, a password, a passphrase, something like that. or something you have, that cell phone with an application on it, or a digital key or badge, or even a plug-in universal USB key, or even all the way down to biometrics. We support all the FIDO2 authentication methods for multi-factor. So if it's an in-browser FIDO2, which is probably the most secure today, we also support that as a multi-factor request, or a multi-factor requirement. Also with Okta, you can do what we call multi-factor chains. So you can not only require just one factor, we can chain factors together, have options of different factors in case maybe our users are moving around a lot like Chase and don't always have their cell phone that's from the corporate cell phone. Maybe they just have their personal cell phone. They don't have their Okta Verify, those kinds of things. Giving the user options to choose different factors for their experience. And then as Okta is growing next year, we're actually adding factor requirements per application, so you can specify which factor each application is going to require. So really cool versatility when it comes to multi-factor. Turning multi-factor on for Okta is probably the most time to value, is the most incredible thing for me. You can turn it on within minutes and set up a policy within minutes and apply it to users within minutes. So within minutes, you're adding multi-factor protection to your applications and to your Okta dashboard. And of course, that integration we were talking about with all of these applications makes it to where you can deploy your applications in minutes. These are browser-based applications. So not only can we protect your applications and protect Chase from that hacker and protecting from all the other things going wrong, but also protect you from Chase and only allowing him to access the applications you need. You can roll applications out to Chase very quickly and as he needs it at the speed he's working. And that number is really more like 7,000 today, but it's growing all the time. And those application integrations are, not just single sign-on, but also provisioning. So if there's an identity piece or portion of that application built in, we can actually provision to that, and then set up even deep into with SAML authentications and SAML roles. Even if the application requires certain roles, we can do things like that. We can push groups and distribution lists. And Okta's actually added what we call workflows, which gives us the ability to do extended provisioning down to those applications. So really adding the roles. We also integrate with all of these security names on the board here. These aren't all of them. This is just a select few, but you may recognize some of them. You may not. But a lot of these are our partners. We integrate with them. They have integrations built into the application that come back to Okta, and Okta has integrations that talk to them. And if you own each of these products, you own that solution set. So if you're using any of these products today, there's probably an integration that you don't know about or you may be using already that works with Okta to help increase the security of your access management solution. And Okta internally, since we're talking about security, Okta internally, we talked about that architecture built on AWS, but that architecture is a unique architecture, and it's actually built with self-healing nodes, and it's built to be always on and always available. We have multiple data centers across the globe. We can do geolocations to keep your data static to the right geolocations. But we also have different cells that do different compliances, like our FedRAMP cell, which gives us the ability to provide FedRAMP certified compliance inside our identity solution. And we're always testing those. We have all the modern tools for security testing on your infrastructure going. We have a 24/7 team of security analysts who are constantly addressing and monitoring for issues, and they're ready to react whenever possible. And then we're also using tools like Threat Insight to report that back to you and your tenant and give you the option to turn on those security measures against those attackers, whether it be a brute force attack or any other kind of password stuffing that we've seen. We're just reporting on those IP ranges and those attackers and giving you the ability to actually go in and block those without having to build your own list. And then seamless and scalable Okta's ability to grow as you need it to grow without you having to rebuild architecture, infrastructure, or architect new solutions for networking to get to Google Cloud or to get to Azure or AWS. We just give you the ability to expand your identity solution as you grow. And I'd just like to touch on 5 key factors here. Multi-factor encryption or multi-layer encryption. So each one of those data segments each tenant in Okta. We are a cloud-based solution, which means there's one version of Okta that everybody is using at the same time. But what we do is for each instance or tenant, we call it our customer of Okta, we actually have a separate piece of data set that is in our elastic storage array, and that is encrypted with an AES 256-bit encryption. And that gives you the secure at different levels, and that gives you a lot of peace of mind in that your data is secure and access. And then all of those certificates that we're using to encrypt that data with are running on certificate authorities. Those are specific to each tenant. There's multiple copies of those in multiple databases, but still specific to each tenant. So each tenant is truly segregated. We also offer a strong credential hashing. So we use a bicrypt or bcrypt encryption, and we do multiple passes on those hashes. So one of the strongest hashing credentials out there, and we're using it today to help secure you, to give you the most secure credential hashing possible. And internally at Okta, we use a zero trust approach. So everything we do is a least privilege access. We don't give access to anyone that doesn't need access to administrative consoles or to tenants or things of that nature. There's a request process that goes through it. And we do have third-party audits that come through and make sure we're following all of our policies and procedures, just like you do today in your own business. And with all of that, I'd like to wrap up. Johnny, do you have any other questions or any other insight you would like to really touch on?
Yeah, we actually have quite a list of questions that have come in. We've got a few that were pre-submitted. We've got some that have come in during your presentation. So I'm going to give you a second, catch your breath, take a sip. For the audience, in the meantime, I'm going to throw out a poll while Michael's catching his breath here, and then we'll go through the Q&A section. So I'm going to throw that poll out if you guys wouldn't mind. We'd love to get your feedback just to know where you stand on some of these items. So over to the Q&A side. So Michael, I'll take the first one that has come up, and I'm just going to read these verbatim for the benefit of the rest of the audience. So first question is, in relation to the hack scenario, how would Okta mitigate the document being opened on the desktop? Most users are already authenticated to O365 in order to read the email. So I'll give a two-part answer, right? So part of it is standby. We've got other solutions that are going to fill in some of that, right? But in this particular scenario, the way Doug crafted this, it was a link to click on, so that went out at that point. Upon the click, he was able to, ask for user authentication at that point. So if you insert MFA into that particular point of the authentication process, that could potentially help. But we have a couple of other solutions that we will talk about in both the data protection and privileged access type of scenarios. So stand by on that one.
I'd say, Johnny, with that Okta is here to protect your identity. And just like the different giveaways we're giving to protect different things, the other solutions that we're partnered with are there to protect your data and protect that.
Correct. I just wanted to throw out that piece, and then I guess the cliffhanger of stay tuned, because we have more solutions in place to help. So here's a question for you, Michael, that I think you covered a tidbit. It was also pre-submitted. So the question is Okta FedRAMP certified? And if not, are there plans to achieve certification for the inclusion in government-owned, government-controlled environments, not DoD, but .gov?
Yeah, so Okta is FedRAMP certified. We do have a FedRAMP cell in our cells that we have architected specifically dedicated to FedRAMP, and we've met all those compliances. Again, a good way to know that is to go to trust.okta.com, and then there is a compliances link you can click on, and it'll actually show you the scope of that compliance and what's covered in all our compliances. But we do currently have a FedRAMP cell that is compliant to FedRAMP certification.
Okay. And then one of the pre-submitted questions asked a very similar question, but around HIPAA. So I know that's much the same as you guys have a HIPAA cell that's created specifically to meet those HIPAA requirements as well. So
absolutely. And even some of our integrations. So we have integrations with your SIM solutions to be able to dump our logs to your SIM solutions. Several of those integrations that we have are doing immutable logs, so that helps you meet your HIPAA compliances as well.
Gotcha.
So not just on the infrastructure.
Okay, we'll keep going through the questions that have been submitted here. So Here's one. Is there any roadmap for Okta to use MFA during the user registration? This is helpful for legacy apps which have their own registration process.
So registration for Okta or registration for a request for access to an application would be my first question. But yes, so what we do is at Okta, there's a way to precede a factor. So you could precede like an employee ID for a security question or something like that to verify that they have the information they need to actually register for Okta. During the enrollment of Okta, you receive an email that is specific to an email address. And the concern would be if that email was already compromised when you sent out that request or that enrollment. But what we can do at Okta as well is precede some factors in which we could require the user to have that information ahead of time.
Perfect. Okay. Can't get by without a licensing question. So we got a licensing question asking, how does it work? Is it per user device for MFA?
Okay, so Okta's license per product, per user, per year. So for instance, single sign-on is a product. Multi-factor is a product. So each one of those products would have a license cost per user per year. And that is per active user and inside of Okta, not in your downstream applications or AD. For our customer identity, it's a little different. We do customer identity according to the number of users who are actually using the product at the time, not the number in the database.
Perfect. Let's see, scroll through the list here. Says, hi, what about third-party applications like a CRM? You have to plug in, or you will have a plugin to support single sign-on, and that's the question.
So Okta currently integrates with several CRMs that are the SaaS-based, cloud-based CRMs. We also integrate with some of the on-premise CRMs that are out there today. We do that with a single sign-on solution, but we also have a product called Okta Access Gateway. So if your CRM is on-premise and it is no longer, it can do header-based authentication or Kerberos-based authentication, we can use, it's basically a reverse proxy, but still provide the same single sign-on experience we have with all of our SaaS-based applications.
Got it. And then looks like we have a couple more here. So does Okta offer an app like Google Authenticator for two-factor authentication? Good question.
Yeah, so Okta uses what we call Okta Verify. It's an app that you install on your device, and then you set up during registration or during your multi-factor configuration, you set up Okta Verify to access or to provide access to that account through a QR scan. And then once that's set up, every time you authenticate and you're using that as a factor, it will then request and say, hey, is this you authenticating on the app?
So here's one more for you, Michael. So the question, I want to make sure I get this right because there's a specific order to this question. So it says, are you seeing people rotate the order of operations from user ID to password to MFA to user ID to MFA to password? I think there's a little hint of maybe a passwordless authentication in there, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, really what I'm seeing today is a lot of people still presenting username and password and then presenting factor, but there's a lot of buzz generation around not using a password at all, and actually just going from a username to a factor and then into the application. Okta is capable of doing all of those. Okta is also capable of doing device type authentication, so the device makes the authentication. And in what we're seeing today is a lot of users moving towards that username password multi-factor, but with the idea of dropping the password in the near future.
Gotcha.
I can tell you that we've had several companies actually retire password reset. So a lot of you out there today, one of your biggest pains is when your users are actually having to reset their password every 90 days, then they forget their password, all that good stuff. We have a lot of customers who are actually retiring that since they're using a multi-factor as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting guidance that's come out over the, I don't know, maybe the last year. Even NIST is kind of changing their stance on the amount of time for password expirations. So interesting. So it looks like last question here, and this is an ask to compare or contrast with another product. So I'm not sure if you'll be familiar with it, but I'll ask you. And if you are, great. If not, then we can always follow up with with this audience member. So can you compare and contrast with Preempt, which I believe is another MFA solution?
I do not have a compare and contrast for Preempt.
Okay. All right. Yep. Understood. We'll just make sure that we follow up with that person. That way we can get a good solid answer for them.
Okay.
So let me look and see. I'm gonna take one more quick sweep. Oh, I did miss one. So we'll call this one the last question, and we'll move on to a prize giveaway, I believe. I think you sort of touched on this. This is one of the questions that were submitted ahead of time. So the question is, does my app have to be a cloud app to protect it with Okta's MFA? And I think you talked a little bit about the Okta Access Gateway, but I'll just give you a chance to respond to that question as well to make sure we, get a good answer for everybody.
Sure. Yeah. So Okta Access Gateway gives us the ability to access on-premise applications through the single sign-on experience. And then Okta on-premise provisioning gives us the ability to provision to some of those applications that still need to have the ability to have an identity local to that software. So we do have a solution in play that'll give you the ability to provision to those applications as well as access those applications through our dashboard as a single sign-on solution, and putting multi-factor in front of a lot of applications that may not have that capability just because they're more of a legacy technology.
Got it. Okay. Yes, I think last little check there, I didn't see any other questions that came through. So we'll move on to one of the prize giveaways.